Today we're going to be talking about community, which is a topic that's very close to my heart personally. I came across a quote recently, which I thought was really beautiful by American writer Margaret Wheatley. And it goes like, there's no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. And I think the key word in here is community and the power that lies behind people coming together for a cause and fighting together, uplifting each other and supporting each other. And so I'm really excited to have all of you here today.
My name is Samira Nasr, and I am the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar here in the US.
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm a fashion designer.
My name is Mischa Notcutt. I'm a casting director and creative director in London.
Hi, I'm Chioma Nnadi. I'm the editor of Vogue.com in the US, though I sound like a Brit because I am.
My name is Virgil, fashion designer, somewhere in between Off-White and Louis Vuitton.
Before diving into the meaning of community and how important community is and how we all operate in that way, I was just going to put the question in the room about the communities that you grew up in and how you think that might have influenced you, how you operate now in your practice and how it influenced you on your path. So maybe we start with you, Samira.
I'm half Lebanese and half Trinidadian. I grew up in a very middle-class, mostly white suburb of Montreal. I had a very turbulent childhood with a lot of trauma, and it was that small community that sustained me. So community has always had a lot of importance for me since a very young age. And I've also always been aware of the safety and beauty that can be found in community.
I'm wondering, for like Mischa, Chioma, how did you feel did you come into this industry and it felt like you were different? Did you realize straight away that you were different, that there was a difference?
I'm from Great Yarmouth in Norfolk, which is like, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's just like a terrible, small, tiny town on the edge of England. Very like ignorant and UKIPville and all that. But I was born to my Jamaican mother and white father, and I moved to London to be at St. Martin's when I was 18. So that whole experience of coming from like a small town to a big city and just being surrounded by so many like different people for me was, even though I had different people in my family and different ethnicities throughout my family, like that was one of the main things of like coming to London. However, going to St. Martin's, through that you find your people and, you know, grip onto each other for dear life and, you know, build on that really. So that for me is how I got into my own community, I suppose, yeah.
I remember as a kid, you know, my mom's Swiss and going to Switzerland, and it, you know, I was very conscious of being othered from a very young age, and this idea of like a double consciousness was something that was completely embedded in who I was as a really small child. And in Switzerland, where people would ask me, "Well, is that your child? Are you adopted?" Or, you know, being in Nigeria, where, you know, I remember recently going to my dad's village and a woman coming up to me at the market and saying, "You're the first white person I've ever seen." And I just wanted to be like, no, actually, I'm not white, but still haven't seen a white person. So I'm so sorry to break the news to you. So I think I had to learn to be comfortable in being the only one in the room for a long time. And so I think now that these conversations are much more open, it's a relief, you know, like to be able to say, hey, and also to build your community and to find people in the industry that you're like, hey, you have a similar experience, or hey, you understand what I'm going through. I think having that community early on, you know, as a young assistant or as a young writer, that was really to feel supported and to feel like you have, like that's, you know, even if your experiences aren't the same, like knowing that you have someone who supports you and you know, something that someone said to me recently, it's like you can't really succeed if you're not supported.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for me, like I remember my first job was hell because, you know, I remember going into the newsroom and thinking, wow, like there's 2 newspapers in this building and there's like 2 Black people in this building. And, the other guy I went to college with. So, you know, and I remember like walking in, I got braids and I was 22. And, you know, there's a class system in the UK, and I don't sound like I went to private school because I didn't, but everyone else did. And so there was that layer of feeling like you were the only, you know, person from a class background. You're the only person who was living on a council estate or grew up on a council estate or whatever it was. You just, that there's that layer of it too. Yeah. And I remember coming in with braids, and the whole room looked at me like, okay. And then Holly, who I loved at the time, but she didn't understand the difference between braids and dreads. Just and I was just like, so yeah, there was lots of that in the beginning.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Ago, so things have changed. I want to say that was almost 20. That was 20 years ago.
That's a good one.
I can definitely relate to that. I grew up in Austria, you know, so that was fun. Like a Black Croatian Jew in Austria, so that was a winning combination. I remember going to Croatia with my braids on, and people would stop on the street. So yeah, so that was an interesting start. Virgil, I'm really interested in your sort of like story, because you have an engineer background, which I believe you did because of your dad, which is something similar. I studied economics because of my dad. That's just that I didn't finish it. And then you studied architecture, and then you were found by this guy called Kanye West, who said, "I know this kid in Chicago. I heard about you."
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of it all.
Yeah. No, you know, like, yeah, I'm a son of two Ghanaian parents. They came to Chicago and ultimately Rockford, Illinois, where I grew up, in order to sort of, you know, that quote unquote American dream of giving your kids a different opportunity than one that's afforded to you. And, you know, much like coming from that community and understanding like an outward view of the world, where Africa sits in terms of all those perceptions. I grew up as a kid super thankful and cognizant of what the practicalities of growing up in Accra in Ghana and West Africa are, you know, like open gutter, minimal opportunity to move upward, etc. So you know, I was very cognizant of that from a young age, you know, like, hey, I'm sick, I don't want to go to school today. Just frankly wasn't in my vocabulary, given knowing, you know, and so when my story is linked to how I was raised and where I come from quite singularly. Yeah, so you know, I approach that, so, you know, I'm 40 years old. I approach every day like a school day, and I don't take.
I think that's something we all have in common. It's like students for life sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I'm a student for life. And we lost you there for a second, but I was also going to ask you, because I feel like I mean, I've done a lot of research about all of you here, so I know that the paths were not necessarily straightforward. But Andre, you knew from the beginning that you wanted to be part of the fashion industry. You staged your first show at like 15 in a nightclub?
Yeah, 14 actually. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was you know, t-shirt show, and you know, my family background, like my mom was such a crazy entrepreneurial spirit, and she loved fashion. She loved working. She loved being a hairdresser, and that's kind of how I kind of started looking at clothes, because my mom used to be a go-go dancer, and in Germany and in Italy, because I was born in London too, so yeah, so I was seeing things in fashion like from like 4 years old, and by the time we moved to America, which I guess I was 7 years old, my mom immediately, like her first year in America, got a subscription to W magazine. So I'm like being breastfed on like, haute bourgeoisie society. Like, for me, I don't see race at all because I'm like clocking in on the Parisian, European fashion community, which is kind of like a post summer of love, like 70s, mid 70s to late 70s and 80s, like was a total caravan of different, identities in fashion. Like Steve Saint Laurent was ruling with like his casting, like the black girls, the white girls, the Indian girls, the Chinese girls. It was like every single race had to be accounted for, or you were not a brilliant European fashion designer. So that's
do you think
that I grew up with.
Do you think that changed then along the way?
Of course it did. Yeah, but like towards like the end of the 80s into the mid 90s, there was like this shift, and I think that shift came like after like the whole rave kind of society, heroin chic. I don't know, like it kind of shifted because you went from seeing girls like Anna Bailey, Iman, Kirat, all these wild different girls. Even Givenchy in 1976 bought over all these Black American girls for his cabine for haute couture, and it was like an amazing thing to see. And it was like the front page of W magazine, So that's how I started work. And I started selling clothes at Patricia Field at a very young age of 17 years old. I started coming to Paris when I was 17. I was basically running away from my family because they were driving me insane. They didn't want me to go to fashion school. They didn't want me to become a homosexual. There was like the whole AIDS crisis. Like, everything was going on at the same time. You know what I mean? But bonjour, hi.
But there he is. Still, there he is. How we all connected is that community to us is really important, the way we individually practice our way of working. What do you think is what's the benefit of working this way? Because I feel like for me anyway, for a long time, it felt like I've almost felt like, especially in the Black and brown, the BIPOC community, people were almost like pitted against each other.
Yeah.
It was almost like there wasn't enough space for all of us. But the way that I operate as well, and I know the way that all of you individually operate as well, is you always like I read this quote actually of yours, Samira, where you say when you got the job at Harper's Bazaar, you said it's Samira plus 20. I hope that's cool. You're bringing people to the party.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never felt pitted against anyone. I've never felt like there wasn't enough room for anyone. I've never believed there wasn't enough love for anyone, or I never believe there's enough food for everybody. It's just never been, it's not the way I was raised to believe the world operates. And it's just not how I've ever looked at things, even when everybody else was sort of beaming that back at me. I've never subscribed.
You just didn't take it. You just didn't.
Never
I'm not persuaded. Yeah.
And, much like, Chioma mentioned, and I'm sure all of us have experienced, I've always been aware of my differences because, you have to enter a room and you're aware of them because you're aware of the reactions, and I remember when I moved to New York from Canada, that was really when that was an eye-opening experience for me. But I think I've also, because of that, been cognizant of the power that I had once I was in the room, even as an assistant, if I was told I could hire an intern, or even as a young editor, if I could hire an assistant. I've always, for my whole career, even if I had the power to bring one person to the table, I've always sought out people who shared in that experience of otherness, not because I wanted to lock arms with that person or because I wanted sort of like someone to kind of support me in it, but more so just because I've always just believed it makes things more interesting, and I've always believed that I've had the power to make change, even if it was really small and was under the radar. And I've always, it's just really always how I've operated, and I refuse to ever believe that there's not enough for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a
great thing to refuse, man.
Yeah. I have to say, I remember, because my path to fashion journalism wasn't linear, and I was in music magazines. And so when I did my first fashion week, I was a little bit, I felt like a fish out of water. And I remember Samira just took me under her wing, like, it was so nice. Just, we didn't work at the same publication. She just ignored all of that. She was just like, no, I'm going to, and it was such a nice feeling. Cause I don't know. I always think that, I've had experiences in Paris specifically. A security guard came up to me and just asked me, to see my ticket. And I just was like, why did you pick me out of this row of people? Like, why me? And so you still feel sometimes that shows that, you
it's real.
It's real.
It's real. It's real. So Mischa, with you as well, like, I know you are deeply embedded in a community, a very strong community that I'm very happy to count myself to as well. But we have something in common also, in the sense that we both studied fashion design. We both realized pretty quickly after that we didn't want to do that, and that we wanted to do something else. Now you do so many amazing things. You're multidisciplinary. You are a casting director. You are a creative director to people like Helele and Shy Girl, and like amazing people. And you're also an amazing stylist in your own right. But I'm also interested because I remember the PDA community. It's almost like it felt like this, that you and your friends created this space where you could just be. What do you think that, what was the power in that, and how did that come about?
I think and I think it kind of does go in line with everything else. Like, as much as I felt like I needed to create my own space in fashion, like, or with my friends, because I just felt, not saying that I didn't really see and also because I do multiple things, that there was just like a straightforward like direction for me to go, because I didn't really want to go into magazines like that. And I liked styling, I liked casting, and I liked doing DJing and stuff. So I kind of just tried to figure it out. So I did a few nights, and then I started a night called PDA, and 3 other DJs that I used to book for my previous nights included like Akinola Davies, who's now a filmmaker, Siobhan Bell, who's also a DJ as well, and Carrie Sachs, who's an amazing musician as well as a DJ. So we used to all book each other's for each other's parties. So we were like, let's just do this together. And it was because we had such a crossover of different groups that we were all in. We thought, like, this would be like something that we can just do, and literally just to play the music that we wanted to hear. It's actually quite selfish. That was actually was just to be somewhere we could play the music that we wanted to hear. So yeah, we just started the night, and it came, I suppose this is kind of before like safe spaces in that way, like, or the idea of that. And we just ran a night. We were like the only club that went to 6 a.m. in the morning in London. So we went from like 11 till 6, and it just meant that it just embraced a lot of people, and a lot of people came. And yeah, we ran it for like 6 years. It was actually kind of crazy, actually. Like, the amount of misogyny like that we used to get on the door from white men was like nuts. Like, and I had like 2 amazing door girls, this French girl who's Kenyan, and this Ghanaian trans girl, and the amount of views they used to get on the door was just like crazy. So I got to a point where I was like, if you don't like people, chuck them out. I was like, it's not about that. We didn't never made any money off the party anyway, because we ran on a kind of co-op scheme. So like, everyone that played got the same amount of money, unless you were the international DJ that came in, and then you'd get a bit more, and then you'd get to stay at someone's house for free, like, and stay in London for longer. And through that, like, a lot of relationships were made, and a lot of people have gone on do other things, from meeting in the club, which I think that's very London though, isn't it? Like you meet, and I suppose the same in, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming the same in New York and a lot of other cities, like a lot of your social life that runs into your work life is all amalgamated into one, you know. Outside of the workspace, you cultivate those relationships in social spaces, and a lot of times they were the club. So
yeah, it's where a lot of like I actually had people say call it like it was like church. It was like church service. It's like it was like the safe space or something.
Yeah, we used to call it church because it went from like 11 like 11 p.m. on a Saturday till 6 a.m. on a Sunday.
On a Sunday service.
Right, yeah, it was a Sunday for sure. It was one of the like Black queer spaces in London. So like in that, like, yeah.
It's where a lot of collaborators met as well, wasn't it? It's like Kamara and like Campbell and Virginie, and like it was like it's a pool of like kids coming up together.
Yeah.
And talking about collaborations, I think there is no one who is better to talk about collaborations than Virgil. I feel like I've tried to write down all the collaborations that you have done, and I think, and I'm fascinated because I think it's so broad. And then, you know, doing my homework on everything, I find it really inspiring. I mean, collaborations with IKEA, with Evian, with Heron Preston also, which is something that in general I find that really interesting, how you Andre as well collaborate with other designers, and how that is there's something so beautiful that comes out, I think, of that sort of way of working. But what do you see as the benefit? I know that you find you're very like practical about it as well, aren't you? Like when you like IKEA, it's for millennials. I need to get millennials in. I need to talk to these people.
Well, it all sort of starts with like, you know, like, let's be honest, you know, as Black designers, like on a show on a hand, how can you get recognized? You know, like, this is a cool, this is a different Zoom than most normal Zooms. Like, if we go down the history of Black talent in fashion, you know, why are the numbers so starkly pointed towards, you know, not on the cover of magazines, not at the head of magazines, not at the head of fashion houses, not styling the shows, not the photography. So, frankly, you know, my attitude towards collaboration, it was the only thing in my power to be recognized. You know, I was downtown New York with printed T-shirts looking to get them in a magazine. No one was looking to put me in a magazine, and no one was sort of recognizing it as fashion, let alone design, calling it streetwear, you know, like, but I sort of looked at something within my grasp, like collaboration is like, this is the tool that I have, so I'm going to morph it into a language of modern communication. And then, so it transitioned as a means for me to do projects that were noteworthy, because it's another community times another community.
Yeah.
But then, as I got older, you know, and so, you know, I found Italian production for my brand, from Pyrex to Off-White. And so what I thought was like, hey, like Heron Preston we were both downtown New York kids. I was like, I'm going to get you a deal, the same deal that I found myself for Off-White. I'm going to set that up for you, because that'll be two of us, you know, that have infrastructure, have capacity, you know, we started off together, but now you have your own sort of playground. And then, like, if you look at my career in its sort of like state now, it's like, I said this to my friend A-Side, who's a friend of a bunch of us on this call, is like, when we have these resources that we had to garner for ourselves, but now we can pick our head up and see other people at other posts, then we can build like a layer of community, call it collaboration, call it whatever, that we can now co-sign ourselves. And say for Andre, you know, I met Andre 15 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And like, you know, in your Brooklyn apartment, going through the magazine, like at awe at these sketches that I saw that I didn't learn in any other medium about his work, you know, the majesty in his work. And I have Off-White today, and I was like, call it what you want to call it. Like, let's have a conversation and introduce this work to a new generation.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what. So I use collaboration as like an outright tool for community building in plain sight. You know, and I sort of speak about it so that other people can sort of like look at what we have the power to write our own narrative and you know, exemplify and glorify our work.
Guys, yeah.